Oh, it would help if I put on the.
Okay.
That's not the right music. Try this again. All right, stand by. We're gonna do this for real, guys. While we're live. Hang for it. Wait for it. Hey, today is Tuesday, October 17th, and this is the Daily AI Show. I can't do the intro unless I hit my beat on that. So I know you guys are hanging out live. Got a little bit longer of an intro there. As I come back from a 4-day trip in a red-eye flight. Luckily not this morning, but yesterday morning. But I still feel like I'm feeling the effects. Those red eyes hurt, man. They hurt more. They hurt more in your 40s than I remember. Those are brutal. But happy to be back with you guys. And I have not had a chance to catch up on Friday's or Monday's show, but I'm sure they were amazing. So today, we are talking about who's at your table. I think that was our title, who's at your table. But the idea here is that AI is getting so good, and sort of on the idea that we know we can now train a chatbot, if you will, on all the writings. Let's say I'll just pick somebody out of history. All the writings written about or by the person, let's say of Abraham Lincoln, right? So prominent figure in history. If I wanted to have a conversation with Abraham Lincoln, and just in chat at this point, I think quite honestly, in the very near future, this will also have some video elements to it as well, and some movement and things and images. But right now, if we were just to say just chat, maybe future audio or video, I could potentially do that. There's so much written on that particular historical figure that there's a good chance between his writings and all the writings and books about him that I could have a fairly, let's say, accurate chat with somebody and have a good feel for how he might respond to a conversation. Now, if I was going to ask Abraham Lincoln about the most recent Super Bowl, that would be funny, but it probably wouldn't do me a whole lot of good. But the idea is that you could have him at your table, hypothetically or virtually, if you will. So that's kind of where we'll kick things off. I don't know if anybody has one. I've been thinking about this, and I don't know that I have I have a few people, I guess, maybe, but I would love to hear from you guys. Like, what do you think? And if somebody wants to dive in a little bit deeper, because I'm certainly not the most up on this stuff, talk about Meta and what they're doing, sort of. Right. Let's kick this thing off. Who wants to jump in?
So, Andy, okay,
go Jimmy, go ahead.
I was just going to give a quick overview. Essentially, what we're talking about are AI personalities, right? We're giving them enough information to create a baseline for them to respond as themselves. Right. We've seen this in a couple of different ways. Brian, like you mentioned, Meta came out with their set of personalities, which are based upon, actual celebrities and people in popular culture. I have seen some of the early examples I've seen of the whole AI personalities was a video that someone put together between a conversation between Bill Gates and Einstein. Right. So that's been floating around for a while. So I think this has just been developing and iterating, and it's finally gotten to a point where you're right, Brian. You probably, if there's enough information in the background, you can probably have a decent conversation with the person, or at least get their thoughts on something. If they don't know about football, you could explain to them what the sport is and what their idea of sport and get their thoughts like that. I've seen instances where like GPT Boss or Chat Dev, which are examples of personas that are fulfilling certain roles and they work together. You propose your software development, and Chat Dev works like a dev group where, your program manager or your project manager works with, whoever's running your sprints and all this kind of stuff. And then GPT Boss is all of your C-suite and different positions so that you can tap into that kind of knowledge base, right? And then the popularity of sites like Character.ai, where people are developing their own AI avatar / personalities based off of whatever or whomever they want, whether that's popular game characters in some forms or whatnot. And that's what I think is a quick overview of what I've seen in this space. And it does open up for a lot of different options. Like using the Einstein experience, example. If I wanted to learn Einstein's theory of relativity or his viewpoints on physics, I would love to get that from him, and see what his point of view is on that, or an approximation. And that I think that's a big thing that everyone has to realize is you got to take it with a big grain of salt here. Is how advanced or how deep that these personas can go.
So I think it's interesting that you're calling it a persona, and that's a direction that I actually hadn't thought about. Because for me, it's actually about being able to access somebody's knowledge or teaching. And when you gave the Einstein thing, I'm like, I'm not sure Einstein's going to be the best person to teach me about the theory of relativity. Like, maybe I could have like the world's best 5th grade teacher, right? Like, explain to me like I'm 5 kind of thing. But I think that's really interesting. So a mix of kind of personality characteristics, but also a knowledge base and a skill, a communication skill.
So here's one thing that because when I did my undergrad and I did my my grad, you had to submit some sort of thesis. You had to submit some sort of paper. We all know the amount of work that you did with it. It sits in the library, and most people won't even look at it. Sometimes you will look at it just to admire back your work. I did one for an honors thesis on an undergrad, and my MBA, I didn't do a project. I did a thesis on it. What would be awesome is there are lots of professors, lots of academic people who have written papers upon research papers upon papers upon PhD students who have done all these things. And I think this is an awesome way to, have conversations with these experts who you don't know about. So I know we're like, oh, would you look at historical figures? I'm like, well, Beth, when you were talking about teach me about relativity, I would imagine there are in some 7th, 8th floor library or the basement of the craziest university or wherever this is, there are papers upon papers or thesis upon thesis of people who have had their conclusions or whatever. And, these tenured people who have been teaching for decades, who have this immense knowledge that some people don't tap unless it's like, the newspaper or the media is like, hey, this is the expert. He gives his opinion or her opinion. That's it. But they have research. So imagine if I would think that a lot of that would be digitized, but still no one's going to find them. But now you can put that into train a model into that. And there it is, that you have a conversation with a real life expert. That would be an interesting way that's if I was looking up for something, if I was, researching, I would love to have access to that. I don't know how to get that right now. I know there's a tool like you can look up academic papers, but I would imagine there's tons and tons of these things running around.
Yeah.
I think the microfiche. Have you heard of I think a dark library in the basement. It's a new technology. I don't want to push it too hard, but
I think the main value though that Carl that you're touching upon is designing that persona as around that researcher and providing their perspective. Because I think that's the key point for pulling it out, right? Because otherwise, it's what we have seen already, right? It's a knowledge base that then you interact with that information, and you can grab that information. What makes it more valuable or more useful is you have the perspective of the person who created it. So it's not just accessing the knowledge base like how we're doing now, or an advanced chatbot now, but but actually getting the perspective of the person who wrote it, which ostensibly could provide better or more in-depth analysis of what they were trying to accomplish with their work.
Yeah, and I have some really, you guys have already opened up my mind on this, but Andy, you just jumped back in, and I know you had something off the top. So do you want Andy, you go, and then I just have questions because you guys have all like kind of like expanded my mind on this already. So Andy, are you ready to jump in?
Yeah, couple points. One, I have always been interested since the mid 2000s in collecting the sort of wisdom of my writings and so on, and having that made available ultimately to my progeny. That was the model of a startup that I did called OurStory.com, a collaborative method for collecting, your personal history in a timeline. And that my vision for that was that ultimately there would be powerful systems that would allow my descendants to actually interact with me in a video form, but based on a collection that I had curated and developed. So it's not just, the famous historical figures, it's actually you. You have an opportunity to collect writing and video and digest that into an accessible AI avatar. So that's one point. The other one is I wanted to mention specifically, the development path that's underway at Character.ai, which Junmi mentioned. This is a couple of developers of the Lambda system at Google who broke out and started Character.ai. And they have their own LLM that's been built and trained specifically for this purpose, which is to have a huge amount of training data, based on the writings of historical figures and so on, and allow you to create your own character. But really, the vast volume of interactions that are being done on Character AI, and I remind you that if you look at the publication of the lists of the top visited chat sites, it's like ChatGPT #1, Bard #2, Character AI #3. That's the one that's getting the most attention because people like this idea of being interact with an intelligent interface that has a personality and a character behind it. So I believe that when you have that kind of volume of transactions, that's where huge investment is going to be made. And so the characters that are in there, and they have Abraham Lincoln. I tried to play this morning with Shakespeare, ask Shakespeare questions about what the Globe Theater was like and who his friends were, and all of that information is available there. But the task of building a representation of yourself or any other character that hasn't been curated by the developers of such a system is an enormous data task. Getting that data in is a trick. Believe me, you have to invest your life doing it. That was one of the things that eliminated our story as a practical exercise, was just the effort that was required by people to assemble their media and write things about it and remember things and ask people to. It was just a project that was beyond the ken of most people who weren't, for example, shut-ins or whatever. So characters and the ones that you interact with are coming. They're being worked on extensively at companies like Character AI, and start collecting your data. And these videos, by the way, are probably among the most, the most data that's been collected about me speaking in video.
Mm-hmm.
So, it will be a source for this kind of assembly.
We should let you talk more.
Yeah.
What would you say, Beth?
We should let him talk more.
Yeah, well, I'm always for letting Andy talk more. If Andy is in both in this show and the jam sessions and stuff like that is always a spring of knowledge, which we all just kind of lean in and listen.
Well, thank you all. That's very kind. That's very kind.
Definitely.
Hey, I did want to bring up this comment because Camilla was kind enough to put one in there. And she said, I love creating persona prompts, excuse me. It makes any work more enjoyable to have a clever personality to engage with. I think that's a really great, not quote, a really great comment is what I was trying to say. And I agree with Camilla. I have not done that as much. I'll be honest with you. And then when I was thinking about this idea of like, who's at your table, honestly, the way my brain went this, but you guys have completely already shattered this, which is a good thing, was like, oh, dinner table, right? That's just where my brain went. It didn't even say dinner table on the title. That's where my brain went. It's like, who's at your dinner table, your best dinner table? And I think about people like Jimmy Buffett, who just passed away. And of course, I never met him in my life, but huge musical influence like he was for a lot of people. Coming out of college, a lot of nostalgia built into that, and going to his concerts and things like that. And would not consider myself to be some super parrot head fan, not stupid, but a fan nonetheless. And I imagine, just as we saw in the books that he wrote and stuff like that, he would have been an amazing person to have around a dinner table, just endlessly entertaining people that my mom admired, like Billy Joel growing up and stuff like that, although he's still alive. Same thing, right? So that's where my brain went with it and said, oh, who could you have this sort of like conversation with people that you really admire that perhaps are no longer around, or you just don't have access to. But if you've all kind of said something to me that I've thought like, oh, wow, I'm thinking about this the wrong way. Jimmy, you were saying about whether it exists or not, and maybe it's just my ignorance that I don't know that this stuff exists in this form, but this idea of like assembling not a dinner table, but a conference table of people. And I know ChatGPT Boss or GPT Boss exists. And to be honest with you, I was never really that impressed with it. I've even seen on TikTok that the creator is pivoting maybe away from that a bit. Not really sure whether that's because he felt like it failed or otherwise, but the idea that you could assemble this super team, if you will, of people who you felt could help you solve bigger problems, be it because you're a literal entrepreneur and you're a team of one. And right. I think back to starting my businesses, whether it was the gym and the CrossFit or the nutrition business, and how often I felt completely isolated, despite having the world and the internet at my fingertips, how hard it was sometimes just to get really what I would consider to be basic startup questions answered. And maybe perhaps in a solution like this, I could have assembled my super team. And again, Beth, what you said, which is like, do I really want Einstein teaching me about relativity? He probably maybe trail on for, because he's so smart. He may not be the best. And I think you said it perfectly. Like, maybe I want the world's best fifth grade teacher to explain this to me. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly who I want helping me with my business. I don't want the expert. I don't want to talk to Elon Musk. I'd imagine I'd be confused and he would drone on and miss the point, and we'd be crossing over each other. I don't want to talk to Elon Musk. I've seen his interviews. They frustrate me. He's a super smart dude, but I don't know that's the one I want on my team, Right. So maybe I do want the fifth grader. And then Carl, what you were saying about like, yeah, and also there's all this data that's out there and all these amazing conclusions and research papers that have been read by one or two. And I've heard similar things before where they've said that, these massive dissertations are read by at most 1 to 2 people. And it's more about the idea of getting published versus necessarily that it gets read, which is a huge miss for the rest of the world if they're not getting to see what's locked on the 7th floor of some, I'm thinking about the library at the University of Georgia. And it was like 8 floors with a basement, and it was crazy and tall and dark. And, what's in there that maybe we want to have more access to, or more than just read the book. But what if I'm able to take this one, and put them at my table, and then immediately start having this amazing conversation through those different pieces? So I don't know. I like, you guys have kind of really opened my mind on this already, on the potential of this, because it's more than just, oh, that would be fun. I think it has obviously huge implications for business. Let me just get a couple more comments. Let's see. Claire, I'm glad you're here. Would you want your own character's AI style chatbot so you can leave this world left left over your knowledge behind people and your family. Now, I already see Andy shaking his head because he's already worked on this. And I am firmly in Andy's camp on this. I've said this before on the show, where I am firmly in the camp of I would be totally okay if I said, hey, Echo, turn on the mom bot. My mom passed away in 2008 and I could have a conversation with my mom. I'm totally fine with that. I'd be totally fine with it being her voice, her vocal inflections. That creeps some people out. I totally get that. But I would be okay with that because I would love to have a conversation with my mom, 15 years past, beyond her passing. So yes, I would declare my answer is yes. What do you guys think on that?
So I love the idea. I don't think I have knowledge that like people are going to be clamoring after.
Please.
But I don't want to wait, right? Like I think that I would love to be able to chat with the Carl chatbot. Because
Right now?
I don't want to bug Carl with every question that I have that I think he has the answer to.
Yeah.
And it would be really cool to just be like, okay, so I've done my like half-hour informational interview with with like the Carl knowledge bot, and now Carl, let's have a 5-minute conversation or a 15-minute conversation that could be more fruitful because you're not you're not trying to catch me up to speed to where you are. That's a self-managed process.
That's a whole bunch of Carl going, did I say that? That's pretty good. I don't remember saying that, but I think you should follow that
yesterday. Carl's just like has a big bubble that says WTF.
Yeah.
Or I could probably say, that's why I'm losing a lot of friends. That's probably the opposite.
But Carl, I had a conversation with you yesterday, and you just ticked me off so much. What were you doing? It wasn't me, man. Yeah.
Imagine, you have someone like who's polarizing. Who's a polarizing? Oh, like either like a Howard Stern or an Alex Jones. Like create a chatbot and that, and like see what you kind of come up with. Didn't was it Tim Ferriss who created an AI chatbot on his web? Was it Tim Ferriss or somebody else? Some major podcaster created and then you could interact with on their website specifically to do something. I'm not quite sure. That's kind of what I remember.
I'll look it up.
I will push back on that though, because I think from a human connection kind of view, I don't know if I'd like to chat with, a relative or like my mom who passed away and have a chat bot. And it'd be very, I don't know how would I base train it to be like, oh, I want you to be emotionally supportive, yet a strict disciplinarian at the same time. How do you train this? Or it's like, delete that strict disciplinarian. Oh, very, very loving and supportful. That's an inside joke. So like how could you like how would that I don't know if it would be the same because that it would feel a little colder than an action. Like there's I think for a lot of us, a lot of reasons why we connect with our parents, it is more for like, it isn't gathering knowledge, it's just having a conversation with them, building that connection with them over time. And that's, to me, and maybe that's why I don't get it with character AI is when I have conversations with people, it's not like I want to build an emotional connection with everybody, but I want to feel that human connection with that person that I'm not sure I can get having a conversation knowing that this, for example, Meta, if I'm looking at Tom Brady's picture, but his name is Chad, it would just throw me off because I'd be like, look, it's like, no, you're not Chad, you're Tom Brady. Or you're like, or whoever else they put up, right? Like Dwayne Wade or any of the sports figures, or was it Kendall Jenner's on there? I was just like, or what, and how they made it up. It just feels weird to know that person's not really that person. Yeah, that throws me off. And I still think there's that human connection element that we're all going to be striving for, and not everyone would want to have those kind of conversations with an AI character.
Right. So I want to add to this, which is it's related to what Camilla was suggesting, which is creating a persona. So like when you're prompting a GPT, you can give it instructions on how to voice it. You can give it examples of voicing, and it can figure out what the style and sort of personality is. And you could then try to get a chat bot, like avatar chat bot, to be like someone who's quite human, and maybe even someone you know. But I think that's never going to be fully satisfying. It's very, very difficult to get the nuanced, authentic personality with any level of training. So even like these videos, if a chatbot were trained on videos of me speaking here, this is not who I am, to my family. So there's a bigger, wider range that you'll never capture. But I think in terms of capturing the information, the knowledge that you have, Carl, in blogs that you've written or TikTok videos that you've done, and allowing Beth to access that information base, I think that's really where we are at this point, trying to get a fair representation of Shakespeare or Abraham Lincoln. I don't know that you're going to get close to what the real persons were. So I think information retrieval, yes. Personality projection, no.
Well, okay. So to go back and put my 2 cents in, I agree with Carl that humans are social creatures, so they'll want to create those social situations. I personally would want to interact with the actual person, but I also get the appeal of character AI through interacting with characters or personas that don't exist. Like one of the ones that popped out to me were video game characters. Like people want to talk to the Mario brothers. I'm like, okay, let's talk to Mario and Luigi. What are their thoughts on X, Y, and Z? And that kind of situation's fun. But I'm also in Andy's camp when it comes to the creating a source, whether it be for, to work through grief or provide information or insight to your family, having that kind of access to an ancestor, especially as time goes on, which I think is hugely valuable to a family, just so that you can go back and say, oh, what did our grandfather or grandmother think, or great grandmother think? That way we can learn about the time in which they lived and what their perspectives were for that time. And I think that'll be hugely beneficial for families down the line as time progresses. So I'm in both camps in those kinds of situations. I would and agree, Carl, the whole meta thing where you have a different personality with the celebrity combo, that's a disconnect for me. I'm like, okay, if I wanted to talk to this chatbot or this character, I want to talk to them, and once the novelty is over, what kind of value am I really going to get from that? Is because it's not them, right? Even if it was tried to be complete a version of them, it's not them. So I personally don't get any value from that unless it's like informational or someone who's just not available. And I guess maybe that's it in my mind. It's like, oh, if they've passed on, if they're historical figures, oh, okay, cool. They don't exist anymore. So I need to create something to help me interact with them to get their perspective. But if they're around, I want to talk to them. I don't want to talk to their
I want to throw in just a point, which is that capturing the full bandwidth human personality and experience, that's very data intensive and storage intensive. I don't think it's affordable.
Yeah,
definitely not now. That's got to be down the line kind of thing.
I wanted to say real quick on the Meta, and then I know we have to get to the TLDR. Meta, and then one other thing, real quick on Meta. I did read, and I totally believe this. It makes sense to me that the reason that the names, it's not Tom Brady or Paris Hilton or Kendall Jenner or whatever, is because if the bot says something that's not okay and cancelable, they are not that person. Tom Brady, nobody's going to say Tom Brady said it. If it's named Tom Brady, I don't care if it's a chatbot or not. somebody's going to be digging and saying, well, hold on, was that trained on something he said that was racist or whatever? So I totally get why they didn't do that as a protective measure. It's also, though, still a weird, interesting thing, because I've been told that they've all been paid millions for their name, image, and likeness, right? Which, hey, great for them. I think that's fantastic. But it is an interesting play. I don't know whether it's successful yet or not. I mean, I've seen it on the messenger and stuff like that. What's that, Carl?
But
you say it is?
It got a lot of backlash. A lot. Like people were like, what is going on here? And I think it just weirds. I think that's where it is. It just weirded you out because you're like, okay, that's Kanye, but they named like Kanye, I don't know, Mike, or it's just weird. So I'm like, okay, so I can, with HeyGen, I can take a picture of Kanye and then train it on Kanye's voice and like kind of do the same. It's and then kind of start doing it the same thing. So it's
but then it's like an unauthorized biography, right? Like at that point, it's like, well, this is my version of what I think, and Kanye could say, "Hey, I had nothing to do with that. I didn't approve that." Anything that comes out of that bot that Carl created has nothing to do with me, and I disavow all of it. So I agree with you. It's weird. We'll have to see what happens with the Tim Ferrissons and the people who approve this stuff. The one thing I wanted to say really quick before we wrap up is one thing we haven't really talked about, but we sort of did, was just education. And I don't mean just like grade school education, although talking to Mario and Luigi, if you're a, fifth grader who loves them, right? That's their big characters or whatever, but they're not getting the concept of math or whatever it is that they're learning. And something like a Conmigo from Khan Academy saying, well, who do you want to talk to? And they say, I want to talk to Mario and Luigi. Cool. And all of a sudden, Mario and Luigi those characters able to immediately be brought in to help understand. And they're using mushrooms and they're using this and that to help with the understanding of math. I love that idea so much. I can't wait for that to be for everybody everywhere, because I think equity in education, there's a lot there. But also, there's a lot there. Maybe it's not Mario and Luigi, but there's a lot there from the business side, just to bring it back around to who we're usually talking to, which is the education for the business side, whether that's assembling your super team, your cabinet, if you will, of the people that you're surrounding yourself. We always say, like, surround yourself with the 5 people that are smarter. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Well, cool. Now with AI, I never have to be the smartest person in the room. I can always assemble 5 amazing people around me virtually that may perhaps have the right mixture for me, personalized, that I feel like can help me advance. And for each one of us in this room, that might be a mixture different, that if I had the same 5 people, Beth would go, well, no, they're not going to, the Einstein example, they're not going to help me. I need my 5, I need my 10, whatever it is, or a mix of that. Really, really interesting stuff. Okay, I know we got to get to the end here, Jimmy.
All right. So TLDR, we'll make it real quick. Who are you bringing to dinner? One character. Who are you bringing or one persona? Who are you bringing to dinner? Go.
So I'm going to go in a different direction. I heard somebody say that they trained a chatbot on all of their own information, not for legacy, but so that they could consult with themselves. Right? They could consult, they could ask themselves questions. So maybe I'm bringing myself to dinner.
Ooh.
Just a thought.
All right.
Carl, Andy, who you got?
I wanted to do a combination of the person. Combination of my former law professor, Simon Verdun Jones. And then I wanted to bring in a fictional character named Jack McCoy, and then have like a long discussion around the table. That's what I.
Andy,
I'm going with it. Andy, who you got?
Oh, you're muted, Andy.
Yeah, for the dogs. Sorry. The context is dinner, and the last thing I want to do is have an intense or deep discussion at dinner. So I'm going to bring a person, an AI person who is capable of doing impersonations of a wide range of comics, and it's all going to be fun.
This is the whole genie, I wish for a million wishes. I see what you did there, Andy. Yeah, I see.
All right. Well, I'm going to be simple. All right. One of my favorite actors of all time was Mako. and he passed a few years ago. But some of the greater roles he played was in Tora Tora Tora. He was in both of the Conan Barbarian movies, the original ones back in the 80s. He played the wizard. And most recently, he played Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender series. So if any of you are familiar with his work, he's fantastic. I would love to pick his brain about his life experiences, how it was acting, how it was from back in the day till now, and what all of his experiences are. So that would be my personal favorite.
And I'll just wrap up and say I can't think of somebody, but I think in the sense of it would have to be some sort of world traveler. I mean, it could be a Jimmy Buffett type style. I think that would be for dinner, a very interesting. But maybe it is an Amelia Earhart. Maybe it is somebody from way back or something like that. But it would have to be somebody like I'm fascinated by travel and what they encountered along the way and how that changed people's perspectives by putting them in situations that made them uncomfortable around different people that didn't look or act or and think like them. So I think I would be most interested to have a conversation with somebody at dinner who was going to open my eyes to just a new way of thinking or new way of feeling about things, because they had seen and experienced things around the world that perhaps I had not been able to do myself. So that would be mine. And I think there's a lot of people who could probably fall pretty quickly into that role. And I'm just probably not thinking about who that is, but
it's okay, Brian. I'll show up in AI form for you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jimmy. I do want to see that curl bot too. I mean, it sounds great. Yeah. I would be taking credit all day long. I'd be like, I said that. That's a good thing. The Brian bot. Yeah. All right. We went a little farther over today, but this is a really interesting conversation. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, it opened up your eyes to the ideas that what this means, where the future of this is going, for the idea of having some AI around the table for you, whether that's for fun or for business or pleasure or whatever the case may be. It's going to be an interesting next few years, that's for sure. So with that, we will wrap it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow for AI in the News, our Wednesday feature. So we'll be talking about all sorts of topics that we've come across, that we've sort of handpicked each over the last 7 days. And we'll be talking about those tomorrow. So who knows what'll come up. You should come by tomorrow and listen in. Maybe it'll be something you didn't even know was going on. That's it. We will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.
Happy Tuesday.